Well, good morning. I have some remarks to make about something I'm initiating this morning, and then happy to answer your questions. I committed during the election campaign that I would be absolutely focused on getting more housing built and doing everything that we could do at City Hall to ensure that housing was built as quickly as possible. A key point of my five-point plan that was in my platform on which I sought and received a mandate was to get more homes built by cutting red tape and speeding up approval times at City Hall by creating a new development and growth division to streamline the process to get more housing built faster. And so I'm announcing today, pardon me, I'm announcing today that work is now fully underway to create this development and growth division to hurry up housing. This is a fundamental change to City Hall and how our government is operated, and it is all to ensure that we cut through what has too often been an approval quagmire for people that are seeking to build housing and get new homes approved as quickly as possible. Senior staff in the city are working quickly to create this division, which will be a substantial reorganization of existing staff in the main, so that they're focused more keenly, even more keenly, on the process of approval and on the delivery of housing much faster. This plan, which represents a fundamental rethink of our bureaucracy, will be a major contributor to ensuring that development applications move as efficiently as possible through our system without sacrificing necessary diligence. Staff have made some efforts to streamline approval processes over time in the past years, and the work of the new Development and Growth Division will build on that. We simply have to do better as a city, and we can do much faster so that we can get built the housing that we need, including more affordable housing. I've indicated to the city staff that I want this division up and running as quickly as possible, and that I will be using the strong mayor powers to implement it, and I expect this new model will be up and running as a result of all of that by early 2023. We're in a housing crisis in Canada, and that is being felt acutely here in the City of Toronto. We cannot shirk our responsibility as a city to get housing built, and we most certainly have to avoid making the situation worse with costly delays. This problem wasn't created overnight, and it won't be solved overnight, but this division, I'm confident, will be a significant step forward to address it. In the weeks and months ahead, I expect to have further updates on this division and the rest of my five-point plan as we work to deliver on the mandate that Toronto voters have given me on housing and other issues. I assure you that the steps necessary to implement the changes needed to facilitate more mid-rise on busy streets and to permit more housing options in neighborhoods across the city will be brought forward very early in the life of the new council. I want to be very clear that this is an issue on which I am laser-focused and on which we will be acting with as much urgency as possible. Helping make sure everyone has a home will help all of us. When home ownership is out of reach and when rental supply is inadequate, affordability suffers, and it undermines Toronto's economic competitiveness, and that hurts us all, and it undermines us socially as well. We've made strong progress over the past 8 years to get housing built in Toronto, but to tackle increased affordability challenges brought on by a national housing shortage, we need to build more homes, and we need to build them faster. The Development and Growth Division and the rest of the five-point plan builds on this progress by looking critically at where we can streamline and modernize processes at City Hall and how we incentivize our home-building partners to increase our housing supply and thus drive affordability, make housing more affordable. This is about making sure that young people can live and raise their families in the neighborhoods they grew up in or in the neighborhoods they want to build their lives in, and that seniors can stay in their neighborhoods if they decide to downsize. It also helps to ensure that newcomers can continue to move to and contribute to this city. I want to be clear to everyone, none of this means rubber stamping or rushing bad applications. Neither does it mean that our planning staffs are not doing their job. What has happened is that a process has evolved around our professional staff, which ends up stopping them or inhibiting them from moving housing projects forward efficiently. The design and effective functioning of this new division will unblock that process and, in fact, improve the process within which our staff do their important work. It should make their jobs easier for them to carry out. It will empower planners who work in the city to get housing built faster while still making sure we're building complete communities and prosperous neighborhoods that people of all ages and all incomes can call home. I am totally determined to tackle this housing issue, and I know that Premier Ford and Prime Minister Trudeau share that commitment to get more affordable and attainable housing built, to get more housing built generally. Progress is possible. This plan builds on my record of championing pro-housing policies over the last 8 years. In the month of July alone, July of 2022, I led the City Council in approving a total of 24,829 housing units, including 2,060 affordable and 2,413 purpose-built rental units and 775 rental replacement units. In the past 2 years, in partnership with the other governments, we've approved and will have built by the end of this year, and in many cases will have people living in almost 3,000 supportive housing units. A fast-paced achievement we must keep repeating together with the other governments, recognizing, as we do, that supportive housing represents the best answer for most of those who are experiencing homelessness, including in particular those among them who are experiencing mental health or substance-related issues. We have made strong progress on getting more homes built, especially affordable and supportive housing. But there's much more work to do, and I want the public to know that starting with this step and other steps to come in the days ahead, we're going to do that work. I wanted my first announcement as re-elected mayor to be focused on getting more housing built faster. That work is now underway because the people have placed their trust in me to work for them for another 4 years. I believe that actioning these policy proposals, building on the progress we have made over the past 8 years, will get them more homes built in our city and get them built faster. And I'm getting on with that job. I'm now happy to take your questions. Well, as you know, one of the enhanced authorities given to the mayors of Ottawa and Toronto is to affect changes in the personnel, the people, the staffing of the city. And so while this work is being done, again, as I've indicated, by consensus, but it's certainly under my direction, it may or may not be necessary to use those enhanced authorities to actually make these structural changes to the city administration. And I guess what I'm saying is that in order to get it done as quickly as it will get done, and in order to perhaps get it done, it may be necessary to use those authorities, and I wouldn't hesitate to do so.
Some of the announcements by the province with regard to they're trying to streamline. Some concern that's been low in stock. Actually take down existing something perhaps losing some of that old stock instead of actually city step in and make sure.
Well, as you know, we have a policy in place, and this is one of the occasional frustrations, more than occasional, I guess, of being in city government in a great big city like this with its own policy challenges and with its own, accountable administration. And we have a rental replacement policy in place that is quite straightforward and talks about the need to replace apartments, especially those that are affordable or for people with lower incomes. So I would hope that as we review, and we're just in the process now of reviewing what I think is a 135-page piece of proposed legislation to determine the things that are of concern to us and the things we support. I should say at the outset, I'm generally supportive of the thrust of what they're trying to do, which is the same thing I'm trying to do here, which is to speed up the construction of housing, especially purpose-built rental housing, and especially housing that's going to turn out to be made affordable by other measures that we implement. But we won't be making as much progress going forward if we also take steps backwards. So I'm very, very concerned, as I always have been, about protecting existing rental stock, and in particular protecting rental stock that is available to lower income Torontonians. And so as we examine the proposals put forward yesterday, we'll certainly have a keen eye on that. I should also say that, again, while I'm supportive of the thrust of what they're trying to do, much of it, I'm very concerned about the financial implications for the City of Toronto. We are in a position where, we want to spur housing. I'm standing here this morning, taking steps to do that. But we also have to make sure the infrastructure is in place to support that housing when it's built. The new apartment buildings, whether they be rental, we hope, affordable rental, condos, housing of any kind, duplexes, triplexes, and again, the measures brought forward yesterday do some of the same things I committed to do during the election. They have to have sewers to take away the wastewater. They have to have water to supply those buildings. They have to have roads and transit to connect those buildings up to the rest of the city. And those were and are paid for in part by development charges. And so while I'm very supportive of some of the means that are being suggested here, including using development charges as an incentive, there is no question but that for a government that already has a several $100 million financial challenge, What we can't afford to see happen is to see one government make promises and pay for it with somebody else's money. And these charges we collect are not just charges that go into the general revenue stream. They are charges that are specifically allocated to things that need to get built under the principle of growth paying for growth. And so I'm very concerned about that. I've registered that already in advance of these proposals coming out because I'd heard word of this with senior people in the government. And we'll be certainly keeping a very close eye, as I think will other municipalities, on that going forward.
Like-minded projects like that. It sounds like city staff have identified that the province's standards would be Toronto Green Standard for possible for Toronto any of its next year.
See, again, you may actually be, and I would never want to concede this, but you may be ahead of me in terms of talking to someone who's read something I haven't yet read or had a briefing on. But if you said to me, let me accept for a moment the proposition that somebody told you was the case, which is it might eliminate our green standard, I would be very concerned about that. I mean, we put that standard carefully in place, and I get the odd concern about it because it does involve some additional investment people have to make. But these are the kinds of investments we must make going forward. And while I understand and I'm embracing completely the urgency of building more housing and more affordable housing in particular, it cannot be done at the expense of us going backward on our environmental obligations. I take our existing policies, the Green Standard and others, and our commitment to future policies as part of Transform TO very seriously, because I think if there's, there are a number of sort of generational challenges that exist right now in front of the government, and these are things that I made reference to during the election. One of them is the need to create housing and affordable housing in particular. But there's another one that's out there that didn't get as much discussed during the election, to be candid, and that was climate change. And, yes, there's a balancing act on everything you do. But the notion, if it's true, that the green standard would be sacrificed under this legislation, and I can't confirm I've read that, but you've mentioned that to me, I will be very concerned, and I'll certainly be looking for that now in the briefings that I will have on this going forward, and I'll register whatever concern seems appropriate with the province. Yes. If you look at the pace at which we've been approving housing generally, and let's not forget the targets they set are targets for housing generally, we would not have, I think it would be a challenge that we could meet. I've been more concerned, as you know, since really 4 years ago on the number of those units that will be affordable, and even deeply affordable and supportive for that matter, because I think we have a need to continue to achieve the progress we have on supportive housing for those who need extra supports. But I think the overall number that seems to be attributed to Toronto during that period of time is achievable. I just think it's all the details underneath that and within that that are more important, such as, does it come at the expense of environmental standards? Does it come at a financial cost to us that is just not bearable, by the city at this moment in time because of DCs? Does it come at the expense of other things that are important to us? And so this is all part of the discussion we have to have with them going forward. This is just a piece of legislation that's been introduced, not passed, and so now the discussion begins. No, to be honest, I mean, what we kept hearing was different sort of rumors, and of course, in this business, the world is made of rumors. Some are reliable and some aren't, and so that was the basis, for example, upon which I looked into the question of development charges, because I heard, a rumor that development charges were going to be affected. And it turns out, yes, that was a correct rumor. And I had a chance to register at that time what I've registered with you today and what I'm going to be registering, and I did in my statement yesterday with the Government of Ontario, namely that we are just not in a position to absorb the cost of, in effect, somebody else's not bad idea. I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea at all in substance of saying that maybe if you incent, developers to financially to build more rental and in particular even more affordable rental, but at the end of the day, we would be looking to the other two governments to pay for that, because in our case, that money all is collected on the basis of specific infrastructure projects that have to be done in order to accommodate that growth. You look at the criticism that I did hear out on the doorstep, and a lot of it directed to administrations going way back in time, where there had been approvals given to development projects and infrastructure not built to accommodate it, and people were saying you can't continue that way with the pace of growth that's going on in our city. And so that's what these development charges are for. I'd rather not have any increase in development charges ever, just because I understand that contributes to, the cost of housing. But at the same time, I also understand it is not responsible, to be building buildings without proper sewage systems in place, without proper water, transit, roads, all the community centers, libraries, all the things that we specifically attach to the development charges that we put in place. Well, I mean, we've done some preliminary calculations because we'd heard these rumors, and then we went and sort of looked at that again yesterday in the context of what we actually saw. And we're talking here about hundreds of millions of dollars. We are not talking about a few $1 million. I'm not saying if it was a few $1 million, I'd just say, well, that's fine. But I might be inclined to say, well, look, if that's part of the additional contribution we have to make to the construction of more purpose-built rental, when we've already put up $4 billion of the city taxpayers' money over the next number of years to get that built, that's the amount of the deferrals we've put in the window and put into legally binding agreements that we have for tax deferrals and waivers of charges. So if it was a few million, I might say, well, maybe that's just part of our share. But when it's a couple $100 million for a city that's already, got a financial issue of hundreds of millions of dollars, and if you think about it, it's just not fair to go out and change a piece of legislation and make a promise and sort of say, well, it'll get paid for by somebody else's money. I mean, if they believe, and I don't even dispute the fact this could be a valuable tool to help us get more rental housing built, well then help us, be partners, good partners with us, and put up the money or work with the feds to put it up together, because we just don't have the ability to raise that money. We don't have the tools to raise it.
As well, there's a very vague mention of a pledge that municipalities will make to build to the targets the province has laid out. Do you know what that could entail, and if there will be penalties?
No, again, we'll have to review. We're in the midst of reviewing the legislation, but I think it's become customary. If you look at the rapid housing program the federal government brought in, they said, well, we're going to give you this money to build or buy buildings, which we did. And that's why we were able to achieve 3,000 units last year in a very short period of time that people are living in today. And I would invite any of you who haven't, I know the election's been on and you don't have much chance to see these things. Go and see some of the modular and other housing, supportive housing we've put in place. And a lot of it, you could take the timetable and see that it was done in like 6, 9, 12 months. It was amazing. But what they said in that case was, well, we will give you the money to pay for the modular housing or to buy a building. We bought a couple of buildings and hotels to turn into supportive housing, but you have to have it done in a defined period of time. And I actually like that because it sort of, made us move quickly to get these things done. And so if there's that kind of an incentive where they were saying, well, look, we're only going to help you. But in this case, I'm sort of worried that what they're in fact doing is saying, well, we're going to give you these targets and we're going to tell you that you have to sign a pledge, but we're actually going to make you pay for them too. And I don't think that seems like a fair kind of partnership. But I haven't read that specific provision as yet to know exactly what it says. But I'm going to be having a look at it, and I'm sure as we talk over the next day or two, we can answer those questions better.
So that kind of leads to my question. Do you have a target as to how many bills by the time?
I haven't. No, I have, as you know, I have a set of targets that were put in place that were actually to extend over 12 years, 4 years ago. And we're actually ahead of schedule on some of that. And so I haven't updated that. And I will commit to you that at some point in time, I won't say it'll be in the next few days, but at some point in time, we'll update on what we've done relative to those targets and whether we're going to revise them. I think that this target that Ben asked me about, this target is one that they have set for a slightly different period of time. And they've set it 4 years after I set the ones that originally were set for the city. But we'll revise all of that in light of all of this. I mean, if you combine the federal government having things like rapid housing programs that require you to do things within a certain period of time, which I like, if you combine that with the province having set some targets for Toronto yesterday and then our own targets, I think what we have to do is spend some time bringing all that together and saying, okay, it's one plan. It's got one set of parameters as to what we're going to try to achieve, and they spell out only at the top level, I think, the number of housing units generally, whereas I'm very focused in particular as well on purpose-built rental and on affordable, and supportive, because those are things we know in the city that we need.
Some concerns raised about the timeline on the incentives to actually build purpose-built rental and say a 25-year period, some pointing out that runs out very quickly.
Well, I do. And if you look at our projects that we've had, I mean, many of them, and that's one of the reasons why we've managed to commit as high a number as $4 billion to this, is because if you're going to make something, which we've tried to do as often as possible, to be affordable for 99 years, then that obviously involves a lot of money that you're deferring over that whole period of time. And I think our secondary position, when it can't be 99 years, and this depends on negotiation we're doing with the people who are building this and whatnot, has been 50 years. And so while you would take affordability for any period of time you could get it, I mean, in the sense that it's all better than not having affordable units, we prefer a longer period of time because it just creates that kind of security for the tenants who are involved over time, knowing that those units will not convert into something else. And so, and I think especially when we've had public money involved, as we have, and public land, we really want to make sure that we have the period of time during which these units will be affordable as to be as long as possible. And I think I'm right in saying that the 99-year period generally coincides with the period of time we're putting the land up for a very nominal sum. And it also extends, it also often coincides with the kind of life expectancy of the building. So I would just say to you, we prefer a longer period because it provides greater security for those who will be in need of affordable housing. And I suspect in a big city like this or any other big city in the world, that period of time extends out, you know, quite long. I mean, it's into as far as the eye can see. It's long past the time when I'll be here, here on the earth. I mean, let alone here at the City Hall. City Hall, I won't be here for another 4 years. That's it. Yes.
Seems to have a build by the city. Crossing the right.
Well, I think the one thing that we need to do, given that we need to have, if you look at the targets for the next 10 years, I mean, they are targets that go well beyond the number of units that are approved and not yet built in the city. I also understand, as someone who came from business, that there are many considerations to do with the sort of overall state of the economy and the housing market that influence the decisions made by people who are building buildings as to when they start the construction. I think our job and the job I'm focused on today, and I think this is actually a very important announcement. It may seem like it's something that just has to do with, you know, public service reorganization. It is public service reorganization. Yes, that's what it is. But it is a fundamentally important rethink of how we're going to manage the approval process here. I'm going to be personally committed and involved in making sure it happens. I'm going to be personally committed as mayor and involved in changing the culture that says that one thing we're not going to do is we're not going to make sure that we spend 3 or 4 years after people buy a piece of land and come forward with a plan to develop it, 3 or 4 years getting them to the point where they could build anything. So, you know, I can't control when people build things, although we're going to have some discussions about, you know, what was in the in my platform about, you know, how long the stretch is between approval at some stage and actually beginning construction. That was in my platform as well. But for today, what I'm really focused on is making sure that people who want to build housing, people who are encouraging to build housing, including with financial incentives, that they know that they are going to be in a period, they're going to be involved with us getting approval in a period of time much, much, much less than today, which sometimes stretches out to 4 years. Because during that 4-year time, you want to talk about something that pushes up the cost of housing. During that 4-year time, people have bought land, they've borrowed money to buy it, they're paying interest on that at higher interest rates, and that is contributing to the lack of affordability of housing. And so that is a separate issue, one that is much more governed by the marketplace, but I'm certainly attending today by getting on with this work here. And they've been working on it now for some time because it was very clear that it was something I was going to do if I was reelected. In fact, if the election had come 6 months later, I would have done it by now because I started to ask them to work with me on this some time ago.
On the shortfall, what are you calling for specifically? Of the cost?
You know, to be honest, I don't want to sound like, I mean, I think we've been very good about sort of saying when it comes to some of these transit projects and so on. So, for example, I mean, there was a bit of, you know, misunderstanding of the transit deal, the way it was presented during the election campaign, where people were saying, well, this is somebody else's deal. It's Doug Ford's deal. And people didn't take account of the fact that the city building fund, the way the deal was put together, yes, they pay for construction of the Ontario line and so on, but we get to take all the city building fund, which I put in place, and which now I've received 2 mandates from people saying, you know, yes, that they have no objection to that. And it is now available for state of good repair and other things. We've put $1 billion of that money towards the construction of the Scarborough East, Eglinton East LRT, and it's on the table. And I think that, but I think that in a case like this, where this is not by way of some 3-way agreement that we sat down and had about how we can incent the construction of rental finance, that I think, and given the financial position of the city at this point in time, that it should be the case that the other governments, plural, and to me it doesn't matter what combination of the two, should pay for these incentives because we simply don't have either the money available at present for a city that has several $100 million hole in its budget, or quite frankly, the means to raise it. I mean, they are taking one of the only means we have, development charges, to pay for infrastructure. There's only three ways, basically, in a nutshell, we raise money: property taxes, development charges, and the land transfer tax. I mean, that's basically it. I mean, there's little bits here and there from fees and so on. So they're taking one of those and saying, well, we're going to use that money to pay for something that we think is a good thing. I think it's a good thing too. I think using development charges to do this is not a bad idea, to sort of have an incentive to say, if you build purpose-built rental, that we will, give you a break on development charges. I'm just questioning who pays for it, because we can't. And I suspect there are going to be other cities you're going to hear from that say the same thing, that they just can't afford to give this up. It's to build, as I've said, I hate to repeat myself, but it's to build the sewers and the water pipes and the transit and the roads and all the things, community centers and libraries, that we have to build to make sure we have complete communities and communities that are properly served.
So I'm just asking, one of the questions during the campaign, strong mayor powers here of this announcement, saying is that what we can expect over the next month?
That's going to depend on, more so than anything else, is how well can we work together as a council. And I'm actually very optimistic about that. And I saw some of the comments yesterday of some of the new members saying they wanted to work with me. I mean, I am the only person that has a citywide mandate. I got a significant mandate, and I explicitly campaigned on what it is that I felt had to be done with respect to housing, with respect to taxes, with respect to transit. And so I'll now be seeking to implement that mandate. I'm the only one that has one from people right across the city. And I'm not saying that, I'm saying I will work collaboratively with them and cooperatively with them. I look forward to doing that. And I've begun to talk to some of the people that got elected on Monday already. But I will also say that, and I was very clear on this, that when it comes to things like the housing program that I explicitly set out in my platform, I intend to see that through. And it is actually consistent in some respects with some of what you saw done at the province yesterday, because I think all of us recognize, federal, provincial, and city government, that we have an urgent problem on our hands with respect to the supply of housing and the affordability of housing. And so when I make mention of using these powers in this particular instance, it may not be necessary. But in order for me to be sure we can get this very fundamental reorganization done that focuses on much faster and more efficient approvals, if there was any doubt about its ability to be put in place as soon as possible, I will use the authorities that I'm given, because I think this is one of those problems that is that urgent. But I've said to you before, and I repeat it today, I don't anticipate, frequent use of these. The budget process will be different by definition, because the law requires that I bring forward the budget. So that will happen every year, because that's now my responsibility. And then things flow from that. But I think in terms of my using these to sort of push things forward, I would not plan on doing it, but I won't hesitate to do it if I think it is in the public interest.
You said that staff were still sort of
To be honest, that's another area, Sean, sort of consistent with what Matthew asked me about in terms of the green standard. I just haven't read. I haven't read the law myself yet. Even I, as a lawyer, 135 pages, and it's one of those bills where it'll change a section of an act, and then you have to go back to the actual act and see what that said, so you know what it's changing. So I haven't been briefed. I saw only the reference in their own materials to what is proposed, and it puts it in that sort of benign way that these government releases often do, I guess, including the ones we issue. And so I'll have to have a detailed briefing, and I usually take the trouble to read this stuff myself, because I can try, but I just can't comment yet. I'm sorry. It's just the day after, and I will read up on it as soon as I can in the coming days, and we'll talk about it then. Anything else?
Is the city looking at properties to sell to developers or change? I'm just thinking downtown Core, you have Salt Yard stop at Kings. This is where they park trucks off of King Street, and then prime condo real estate.
Yeah. First of all, I should say to you that we have already put up 73 acres, which is quite a bit. Or I forget, 73 acres or 73 hectares, do you remember? Yeah, so I think it's 73 acres of land. So I'll start again, just so you have. We've already put up 73 acres of land, and so when you look at the Housing Now projects and others, they largely consist of land we put up, to be frank. And the province has stepped forward and done something in this regard, and the federal government has made some statements of good intention. I've been after them for a couple of years, in fact, maybe even stretching back to the previous government, that the federal government too should be putting up some of their land, which I know they've done an inventory of it because I asked them to do it and they told me they'd done it. But we haven't yet seen a piece of land they've put up for this purpose. And if you said to me, do we need to put up, and in my platform, again, to go back to something I'm committed to doing, I've said I would put up more public land, especially for cooperative housing. I'm a big believer in the cooperative housing movement and product. And I think if you look at the history of the developments, many of which were built 50 or 60 years ago, they've worked well and they give people a sense of ownership in a different way. So the answer to your question is yes, we'll be continuously looking at the use of public land owned by the City of Toronto for different purposes, not limited to housing, but we will be looking at it for housing too, as we have done to the point where we've already put in use, I think, some 73 acres of land for that purpose, and we'll be doing more. Anything more this morning? On housing? I'll say this. There are continuous discussions going on. So in that sense, I can't say that we don't talk about these things. But in terms of consultation that sort of leads us to conclude something together before a piece of legislation is introduced, I think we have to continue to work at that. I think that, to me, that is what true consultation is about, is that you sit down, with your partner. And in this case, I think it would be best if we all sat together, all three governments, on housing, because we're all involved. And we actually sat there and reached an agreement on how we could facilitate the construction, say, of more rental housing or housing generally. And so I can't say we don't talk about these things. We do. But sometimes, when you get a 135-page bill, if you said to me, well, had we discussed all of those things? And I don't even think it's reasonable for me to say we should discuss every single line in that bill. But on the big points, should we be trying harder as governments together to sort of reach a consensus and then have it announced? And perhaps we'd all make an announcement on the same day saying this is what we've all sat down and agreed to do. And I think it carries with it, when you have that depth of consultation, the expectation that everybody will do something. So here it is, our rental housing, incentive program, joint, and here's what the feds are going to do, here's what the province is going to do, and here's what the city's going to do. And I think it makes it easier for you, but more importantly for the public and for the industry to kind of understand the whole package. And so I think we have work to do on that. And it's just part of the frustration that I have on a number of areas where I just think this is a big, responsible government that once again held itself to account to its residents on Monday. And it has the public service, excellent public service. It has the legislators and the others necessary to do a lot of things. And I think we should be considered as partners as opposed to in some way being seen as subordinates or people who hear about these things the same time you do. And so I'm not complaining about that. I'm just saying I think it's something it's a work in progress. We've got more work to do on that. I would separate the issues, Ben, and I think that's because they look at these monies differently, and they are different. These are not just general revenues we're taking in, that sort of, frankly, if they were general revenues and we could spend them that way. I noticed with interest there was a reference made to the development charge reserves that we have. And this is very important that I should explain to you, and not because you don't already understand it, perhaps you do, but at least I can make sure that you are aware of this. Yes, the city has development charge reserves, and they have a lot of money in them. And that is because we collect the development charge, but we're not necessarily building the sewer pipe or building the road or building the transit project that day. And so it is a legal obligation that we keep that money in a reserve fund, not as some kind of bank account that's like a piggy bank we can go to and say, well, we need a little money today for the libraries, maybe we can get it there. It is money we have to keep in those reserved accounts for the day when we're actually building the project that it was collected for. And this is back to my point about the fact that, as you know, development charges are collected to build specific infrastructure that is enumerated in the bylaw that justifies the development charge. And so that is what we collect the money for, and that is what we spend it on, and that is what we keep it for. And the reserves are not a general kind of savings account. They're a very specific, legally obligated account that has a mandate to be spent on certain specific things when that expenditure is made. And it's only held in the reserve pending the construction. And so coming back to your question, the issues that we have today with city finances in terms of 2022 and even 2023 are very specific issues mainly related to COVID. And I've said to both governments that we are still experiencing the after effects. I call it the COVID hangover with respect to our transit revenues in particular, but also some of our shelter expenditures. And they're entirely related to COVID. Had COVID not happened and wasn't still happening to some extent in terms of restrictions that exist on different things for public health reasons, we would be absent a lot of those revenue shortfalls and added expenditures. And so those discussions are going along fine. I know that they've taken a long time, and I'm very patient about them, because as long as we're still talking and talking in a sincere manner, which we are, I'm optimistic that a resolution will be found to those things, but they're very different. And so it concerns me for the reason I stated about what is proposed to be done with the development charges, but I think that's an entirely separate thing. And frankly, Ben, again, that relates entirely to capital expenditures. Like, the development charges are collected entirely to finance capital expenditures. So that's really separate and apart from the problem you were referencing with the city's general finances, most of which have to do actually with the operating budget. Anything else? Okay, thanks very much. Have a great day. And I'll live to regret saying this, but I'm glad to see you all back here and be able to stand here and answer your questions. I am. This is part of accountability, and it's good that we can be here doing it together. It's better that way. Thank you.